Welcome, everybody. We'll just give it a couple more minutes, maybe just to allow for a few more people to join before we make a start. Maybe I could ask whilst we're just waiting for one or two more people to join. So welcome everybody to today's webinar. Maybe in the meantime, if you'd like to just write in the chat where you're from. This is a very international setting, a very international webinar. So it'd be great to know which countries and regions are represented here today. So please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat before we make a start. Great to see such a wide variety of geographies represented. Colleagues, shall we make a start? Okay, super. So welcome everybody to today's Vital Sites webinar. My name is Charlie Tokley. I work with the IUCN Protected and Conserved Areas team at our headquarters in Switzerland. These Vital Sites webinars are a collaboration between IUCN and the IUCN WCPA in the build-up to World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi later this year. The concept behind the Vital Sites webinars is really to discuss and showcase different areas of protected and conserved areas that are crucial to achieving global goals for effective and equitable protected and conserved areas. As such, we have a variety of topics along the course of this year. We've already had very impactful webinars on a range of topics, from freshwater to ICCAs to transboundary conservation and other topics. And we will have more webinars as we build towards October and World Conservation Congress. But today is a very, very important topic amongst many other important topics. Tomorrow is International Ranger Day. And as such, we wanted to mark the occasion with this webinar on the state of the ranger. So we'll hear from a variety of people who are working both with rangers and as rangers today. But I'll pass on to Jonathan in a few minutes to give a more broad introduction to this webinar today. Before I do that, I'd just like to do some very quick housekeeping. As always with Zoom webinars, I think most people have experienced these already. We want to avoid any interruptions, so please just ensure that you're on mute unless you are speaking. But we can use the chat as we're already doing, so please do post any questions you may have or any interactions or comments you may want to share in the chat, and we will come to them at the end of the webinar. We have a dedicated space for questions and answers. If there's something more urgent, please do write directly. You can choose who you write to, and you can write directly to me in the chat, and I will try to help you if you have any technical issues. I think those are the main things we want to ensure for the housekeeping. So with no further ado, and just to mention, this webinar is being recorded as well. So if you're only able to stay for some of it, we will upload this to the WCPA YouTube channel after the event today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Jonathan Churcher from the International Ranger Federation. Over to you, Jonathan.
All right, thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Yen, for the introduction there. And as Charlie said, this is part of the series, the Vital Sites webinars in support of the IUCN and IUCN WCPA. As Charlie mentioned, tomorrow is the 31st of July, which for rangers is a very important day. It's World Ranger Day, which is a huge opportunity for us to recognize, remember, and celebrate the role of rangers over the last 12 months. So this webinar today is an opportunity for us to go through, hear around how rangers are part of those global targets that Charlie was talking about, but also to hear some stories from the ground, from rangers themselves, about how their work is impacting on protected areas management, but also on how they link to some of these bigger goals that we have, whether it's 30 by 30 or our climate targets. Yen, if we can just go to the next slide, please. So quick agenda before I hand over to Chris. So Chris is the president of the IRF. He'll be making some opening and welcome remarks, followed by Mike Appleton from Rewild and the IUCN WCPA, who will set the context of rangers within the 30 by 30 target. We're then going to hear from 3 different ranger groups on different areas that they're working in, which all linking to that bigger global target and those bigger global issues that we've been talking about. So Borja from Spain is the ERF training officer. We're going to hear from Amanda from Oceania, who's the IRF Oceania rep, from Mitali and Samita, who've been working in India at the national park there. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with an opportunity to see what the next steps are for the IRF, for rangers, and also rangers as part of the IUCN WCC happening. As Charlie said, any questions, please put them in the chat as we go through. We'll have an opportunity at the end of the rangers speaking to go through those questions. So please do note them down then, or if you want to just speak up once we've heard from the last set of rangers. We'll try and answer as many as we can. But please, thank you all for joining. And Chris, over to you.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to work with our partners on this webinar. So just in terms of giving some introduction to the International Ranger Federation. As John mentioned, it's World Ranger Day, and I'm going to talk to that. But just firstly, a brief introduction to the International Ranger Federation for those who don't know it. Next slide. So the IRF was started in 1992 by a number of ranger associations that decided that it was very important to set up an International Ranger Federation, and so that was born. It has a mission to develop, advance, and promote throughout the world community the ranger profession and its critical role in conservation of natural and cultural resources. We've also got a strategy which is aligned in terms of time frame to the 30 by 30 targets, and our key focus areas are looking at advancing the ranger profession and developing ranger networks, particularly between and for the benefit of our ranger associations, our membership. Next slide. So this just gives you insight into the breakdown of the membership. We've got global coverage, we've got regional associations, and then national and subnational associations. We've got 215 members, and of that, there's 136 ranger associations. And you can see, quite nicely spread, something that we're working on continually to develop new ranger associations so that we are able to convey and carry the voice of the world's rangers. Next slide. As I mentioned, one of the pillars of our strategy is around networking. So we do have a number of ranger gatherings. Particularly, we have the regional gatherings that take place. We've got India, we've got Europe, Africa, and then Oceania. This year, shortly before the World Conservation Congress, we've got the African Ranger Congress taking place, as well as the European Ranger Congress. It's important that rangers from that region look to gather and tackle regional issues and come up with solutions and share knowledge as well within that region. These regional associations then feed through to a global ranger congress. We had one last year, which was the 10th World Ranger Congress, which was in France, in Liège, and the next one is going to be in 2027 in April, and that's going to be in Argentina. Next. So as John mentioned, it's World Ranger Day, and this is a very important day to recognize the work of rangers, but yeah, really just to take a pause so that we can reflect and honor the courage and dedication of rangers around the world. This year, we have World Ranger Day. Our theme for this year's World Ranger Day is Rangers Powering Transformative Conservation, which reminds us of what rangers make possible. They're not just preserving ecosystems and the services that are generated from them, but they're also there to restore balance and also advance equity, enable sustainable economies, build climate resilience, which is so important, and also empower local stewardship. But unfortunately, often we see that this work goes unnoticed and is often under-supported as well. And that is why we need to see rangers for who they truly are, and that is why we define them as essential planetary health workers. But as the work of a ranger is challenging, it can sometimes also be dangerous. Next slide. One of the things that we do is we track the unfortunate situation of rangers who die in the line of duty. As our role of honor, we capture their names, all those rangers, and we've been doing that for many years. But specifically, we've got a strong data set from 2006 until today. Unfortunately, this year, we see that 175 rangers lost their lives in the line of duty. This is the highest number that we've recorded. And it's very unfortunate. And so we try and see what are the causes, and obviously then how do we find solutions to address this. And one of the things that we're seeing is particularly around climate change, where situations that 18% of human wildlife, 18% of the deaths were related to human wildlife conflicts, 17 directly from elephant attacks. Obviously, this is a tragic situation to have rangers killed by the very animals that they are there to conserve. However, it brings into focus the situation where we can take that the rangers are facing increased situations of human wildlife conflict, pressures on the parks, etc., and pressures on the wild animals, and rangers are caught in between. Also, drownings, 8% of the deaths are related to drownings. This talks to potential increase in floodings that are taking place and how that affects rangers as a result of things like climate change, and also the extremes of dry or drought conditions where there's fires taking occurring in places that they haven't necessarily occurred previously, and we've seen an increase there of 8% of the ranger deaths related to fires. 28% of homicides of the ranger deaths are homicides, which is a frightening statistic. Many of those are in conflict areas, but a lot of these are related to a reduction in resource availability. So competition for resources, which are obviously our protected areas, are resource rich, and so they become a target area, and there seems to be increased conflict with rangers on that. Other things as well related to climate change are increased things are malaria, diseases that are starting to spread and affect rangers as well. So lots of impacts associated with global changes that are taking place. And then what that means is that we need to look at these losses and perhaps ask ourselves how many of these deaths could have been avoided if rangers had the right training, equipment, and support in the workplace. Next page, please. And we see that these threats are real. And we did a study analyzing the deaths, and we see the number of homicides and certainly drownings and on-duty deaths, which are varied. But we try to see where can we make the biggest difference within the ranger sector to make it a safer environment for them. Next slide. So last year we released the first ever State of the Ranger report, I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that. It makes for interesting reading, where we actually questioned rangers as well as employers to see what the perceptions on both sides were. So it's interesting to note that there are some serious challenges that need to be overcome in the workplace to improve the safety. So if we look at the things around conditions, 47% of rangers say that they do not have sufficient resources to do their job. And 65% of the ranger employers believe they do not have enough rangers as well. So quite an interesting statistic there. Next slide. Mike is going to talk to these in more detail, but certainly around training, it relates to competencies. And a lot more training of rangers is required. That's what the information is telling us. And the training also we need to look at retraining, because of the nature of the skills required by rangers can have higher levels of skill fade. So it's also retraining that's critical. But I think what's important here is also to look at what we need to match is the increased threat facing rangers with the major investments into the world's ranger workforce. And that is exactly what IRF is trying to do, together with its partners, is pushing for this increased investment, both in capability and in terms of capacity as well. Because if we don't push now, we certainly don't stand a very good chance in achieving many of the global targets that have been set. So we really must make tomorrow different for rangers than what it has been in the past. Thank you very much, and I'd like to hand over to Mike Appleton to go into more detail on this.
Hello, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me fine. Thanks very much for the invitation to speak at this event. My name is Mike Appleton. I am Vice Chair for Capacity with the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. And my main job is with the NGO Rewild. And I've long been involved in ranger work, particularly through the work of the Universal Ranger Support Alliance. And if we could go to the first slide, was the one before that? Yeah, that's the one. Thank you very much. Universal Ranger Support Alliance. Well, what is that? URSA came together following a request from rangers at the 2019 Chitwan Ranger Congress for the support of the international NGO community to amplify the voice of rangers and scale up efforts to support rangers. And in response to that, a group of international NGOs came together alongside WCPA, and you can see the logos there, to help IRF and to help rangers as best we can, given that we had much greater access, if you like, to networks, resources, policymakers than IRF did at that time. URSA is not the representative of rangers. IRF represents rangers. We are there to add our influence, resources, and support to helping the ranger cause. And for the last 5 years, we've been working with the IRF to do a lot in this respect. And I'm just going to talk through what we've been doing. Next slide, please. URSA has invested a lot in helping build the capacity of IRF to meet its mission as representing and advocating for rangers globally. It's not worth, you shouldn't forget that IRF has always been a mainly voluntary organization. And to actually achieve its ambitions, it has required investment in resources and other support, and we've been able to help with that. Next slide, please. A large amount of our work has been establishing a global framework for the ranger profession. We really saw that rangers, if you like, were quite fragmented and not really united. And if you think of other professions, like being a nurse or an educator or a doctor or a firefighter, those professions have a clear and very widely, globally understood identity. even if they're slightly different from country to country. And we needed to focus on that with rangers as well. So they're an identifiable profession. Next slide, please. And we framed this around the 30 by 30 framework, the global ambition under the Convention on Biological Diversity to have 30% of the planet under effective management and equitable governance by 2030. And we thought, well, what does that mean for rangers? And we identified 4 different areas where action is needed in terms of the overall workforce, in terms of conditions, conduct, and competencies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing on all of those. Next slide, please. In terms of the workforce, we need an adequate, recognized, and equitable workforce. The study we did a few years ago now showed that there are far too few rangers in the world. There's maybe only 286,000 terrestrial rangers in the world, which is probably about a third of what is needed based on recommendations and established norms. So there are far too few rangers. There is also a need for formal recognition of rangers, and we have been working with the International Labour Organization to strengthen the recognition, global recognition by the labour sector of ranger work as a distinct and a valued profession. And we've been working on towards addressing issues of inequality in the ranger workforce in terms of gender, and also in terms of the roles and engagement of Indigenous and community rangers. So a lot is being done on strengthening the workforce. Next slide, please. Many of you have probably come across the Ranger Code of Conduct, and working with the IRF, we've also done a lot of work on the conduct of rangers and helped establish a global Ranger Code of Conduct, which can be adopted and adapted to local needs by rangers, ranger organizations, and employers all over the world, so that there is a clear statement of what is expected of rangers globally in terms of responsibility and accountability and rights-based approaches. And there has been huge uptake of this code of conduct. It's had a great impact, and that has led also to wider work on addressing some of the challenges which are associated with ranger work, particularly on building trust between rangers and communities. Next slide, please. We've done a lot of work on competencies. Any profession, as I said before, has some kind of common understanding of what a professional can do wherever they live and work. But that didn't really exist for rangers. So we produced a global set of sort of universal competencies for rangers, which can again be adapted and adopted locally to fit the work which rangers do in a particular place. But this again helps to define and to say to the world, we are a profession, this is what we stand for, these are the skills and knowledge and approaches to work which we all share. And this is all part of establishing a much stronger, united professional image, as well as guiding trainers, educators, and rangers themselves to address competence needs and become more competent. Thank you. Next slide. Working conditions, as Chris mentioned, require a huge amount of attention. And we must remember that under the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 8, decent work, is a sustainable development goal. It's not just a nice thing to have, and decent working conditions are a right for everybody, including rangers. And furthermore, establishing decent working conditions is not just about, if you like, buying boots and rucksacks for rangers. That's gone on for a long time and has to go on because it's vital. It needs a change in mindset of the people who employ rangers, that they're not just at the end of the food chain, the lowest of the low, the people who get hired last and fired first. They are human beings who are asking to do a vital job, and you need to be treated right. And we've been working with the International Labour Organization. We've produced a sort of an example of a ranger convention, which would actually define the rights of rangers. And obviously, IRF is tracking progress through its regular State of the Ranger report. Next slide, please. Workforce conditions, conduct and competence, we put together into a ranger assurance checklist, which is a simple 4-page document, which basically has 10 conditions to ask anyone who's employing or managing or supervising or funding rangers to ensure that they're putting in the right professional framework for rangers to do the job that the world is asking of them. Next slide. All of these publications are available on the URSA website and on the IRF website. They're all available in, many of them are available in multiple languages, not just English, French, and Spanish, but also Asian and African languages. And we urge you to visit the websites to catch up with all these documents and to consult them and make use of them locally where you work. Next slide, please. Alongside this work on professionalization, we've also been trying to change the narrative. When we started on this work, a lot of perceptions of rangers were that they were basically armed guards. And there was a lot of criticism of rangers as being paramilitary agents. There have been some documented incidences of rangers exceeding their authority and conducting abuses against local community members. But these incidents were creating a false impression of the whole profession and actually tarnishing the whole profession, because most rangers, as we know, aren't like that. We're also aware that if you deny rangers competencies, guidance on conduct, resources, and decent working conditions, then the chances of misconduct and mistakes are much, much higher. If you treat people like humans, they're more likely to observe human rights themselves. And also, we have to convey the idea that rangers aren't just guards. They do all sorts of work. They work with tourists, local communities. They do wildlife management. They do a lot of maintenance work. They're far more than just guards. And we're trying to communicate and change away from the language of confrontation, not just warriors on the front line, but planetary health workers. Next slide. We've been communicating this in global policy, which is where the URSA members have been able to exert, if you like, a lot of influence through international conventions, meetings, and congresses. And IRF and URSA have been represented at most of these major international events. And certainly attitudes have been changing since we started. When we started work, rangers were seen widely either as a kind of charity case, oh, poor rangers, they need some boots, or as a risk. Oh, poor rangers, we're worried about rangers because if we help them, it might affect our reputation if they do something wrong. Next slide, please. Through the work of a number of high-level policy meetings, next slide, please, and attendance at international congresses, and also passing on the messages from the last World Ranger Congress at here in France. Next slide, please. And really advocating for rangers at the COP16 in Colombia, where rangers actually took part in highest level plenary events. Next slide, please. We're beginning to see a change where the organizations were worried about working with rangers. Most of these international donors and supporters, and many more not on this slide, are now being much, much more positive about rangers. They're seeing them as an essential workforce for putting into action all these plans they make at these high-level gatherings as indispensable, diverse and valued workers who need support. There is much more work to be done, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about what IRF is planning to do next. But huge progress is being made, and working towards the next World Conservation Congress. Motion 102 is a global motion at the Congress on rangers, and I urge you to have a look at the text of the motion, which has been widely agreed, and we hope will be voted through. Next slide. That's the end of my brief talk. I hope it gives you a picture of where we've been going internationally on rangers. But there's a huge amount more to do, which Jonathan will be talking about it, in translating all of this global policy, this global framework, into real change for rangers in the field, because that's what they're waiting for. I'll leave it there and pass on to the next speaker. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that sort of very broad overview of sort of where rangers are, where URSA and the IRF are also at. I've been putting in the chat the links which Mike talked about there to some of the resources. As he said, they're available in multiple languages, so please do go and use them. They're designed to be used by rangers and ranger employers on the ground to start bringing some of these concepts to life, and it's really important that that they are used. I've also put in a link to the State of the Ranger report as well that Chris mentioned in the first presentation, which is really the IRF's global measuring tool of progress when it comes to rangers. And I'll be talking about the next State of the Ranger report, Volume 2, which will be launching soon. We're going to hand over now to Borja, who's going to be talking about his role dealing with fire specifically. But I think one thing which we're going to hear about from all our presenters, which Mike touched on there, was that piece around the diversity of a range of roles, so what rangers do, but also the diversity of who is a ranger. And I hope that we're going to see some of that come through now in the next few presentations. So Borja, if you're ready and you're set, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. Well, my name is Borja Diaz, and I am the training officer of the European Ranger Federation. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how rangers are evolving in response to the changing nature of wildfires. It's not about firefighting, it's about being proactive, strategic, and community-oriented. We'll explore how rangers work on prevention, how they investigate the true causes of fire, even the motivations behind the intentional ones, and how our daily efforts, though often invisible, have a global impact. So in recent years, wildlife have changed dramatically. We are not just dealing with more fires. We are dealing with a new kind of fire, faster and more violent and harder to predict. Fires now are reaching places that historically didn't burn, catching communities and ecosystems unprepared. These aren't rare events anymore, and they are becoming a part of our new normal. Wildfire have become a major carbon emitters, and in some regions now they release more CO2 than cars of industry. This creates a feedback loop. Fire releases carbon, which accelerates global warming, and that warming makes more fires. So it's not a fire problem, now it's a climate problem. And yet the role of rangers in this cycle is rarely acknowledged. We are on the ground protecting carbon sinks like forests and peatlands, and every fire we prevent, every ecosystem we help recover, that's real climate action. Rangers are not just reacting to emergencies, we're helping to break the fire climate loop. But what do we exactly do as rangers? Well, we patrol, respond to emergencies, give environmental education, monitor ecosystems, and interact with local communities and land managers. And this diverse role is precisely what allows us to understand wildfires in both their physical and human dimensions. We know how fire spreads, how terrain and vegetation influence behavior, but we also see how human activity, legal or otherwise, contributes to risk. That field level insight is essential for both prevention strategies and fire investigations. So what do we do when fire strikes? Well, when a fire breaks out, rangers are often the first to detect it, because mainly we are already in the field. We know the terrain, the access routes, fuel types, and weather conditions, which allows us to respond quickly and act before the situation escalates. In many cases, we are on the front lines, actively working to contain and extinguish the fire alongside other specialized fire units. Our actions help to protect lives, property, ecosystems, and try to prevent the small fires from becoming large-scale disasters. We also play a key role in coordinating fire services by providing real-time local knowledge of the area and fire behavior. Prevention is very important and many times invisible part of our work. Rangers patrol high-risk areas, maintain fire breaks, and monitor illegal or dangerous activities like uncontrolled burns or abandoned waste. We also carry out environmental education in local communities, especially in fire-prone regions, to raise awareness and reduce risky behavior. And we listen. We listen to communities who often have practical knowledge about how fire behaves in their area, past incidents, seasonal risks, or human factors. Also, and this is the central part of this presentation and our work, is to understand why a fire happened, because understanding that is as important as extinguishing it. Rangers with the proper training can identify whether a fire was caused by lightning, negligence, or intentional human action. But we go farther. We try to understand the motivation behind those actions. Was it economic, negligence, political, related to land use conflict? This work isn't about pointing fingers, it's about gathering reliable information to prevent the next fire. And we fit the system with high quality field data and context that managers and authorities can use to improve both prevention and communication strategies. So this is what makes our role strategic, not just operational. And to achieve this, we have to arrive very quickly to the fire. Sometimes before the fire is suppressed, we're already there investigating the causes of the fire, because there are many things that could happen to the evidences. And I will put this more graphically. As the imagine suggests, and it's a bit funny, but the longer we wait, the harder it is to figure out what really happened. At first, the fire scene tells us a clear story, but over time, the story fades. And it's like trying to draw a horse from memory a week later. You'll end up with something that vaguely looks like a horse, or maybe not at all. So here's the core to it. We can't solve a problem we don't understand. If we don't know how or why a fire started, we cannot prevent the next one. And that's why fire investigation, done fast and well, is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Local people and even visitors can be some of our best allies in fire prevention if we bring them on board. When we involve them in our work, they become more than observers. They become sources of valuable information. They help us understand the social context behind many fires, what tension exists, what habits or tradition increase fire risk, and even who might have been behind suspicious activity. This kind of insight is something you don't get from satellite image or weather models. It comes from trust, conversations, and long-term presence in the area. So prevention is more than just tools and maps. It's about people and how we engage them. Also, when we send all this information to the managers and they create policies, we also see the feedback of the people. We see how people interact with these policies in their daily lives. And that gives us a chance to provide useful feedback to share what seems to be working, what might have need adjustment, and what ideas are emerging from the people themselves. Locals and visitors often offer insights that can make prevention efforts more realistic and easier to adopt. Our role is to bring those voices to the table and to help ensure that the strategies are not only technically sound, but also well understood and supported by the communities who live in and visit these landscapes. Okay, so this slide is a summary of how rangers contribute throughout the wildfire cycle. So we do prevention, we are first responders, and we do fire investigations. And many of you may ask, is really investigation a vital role? Does it make a difference? The evidence says yes. As shown in the chart, once systematic investigation of fire causes was introduced and corresponding policies were developed, both the number of fires and the area burned began to decline. That tells us something important. Understanding the reasons behind fire leads to more effective prevention. And rangers, thanks to our presence in the field and our link with communities, are in a unique position to contribute to that understanding. And before we finish this presentation, let me speak about an example that shows how well-structured local initiatives can have much bigger impact. In Spain, the government created a unit called FAST, the Forest Assessment and Support Team. These units are one of the things that we send to countries that are requesting support when they have big fires. This unit provides expert support during complex wildfire situations, analyzing fire behavior, advising on suppression strategies, and helping authorities make informed decisions in real time. And one of the most important components of FAST is that it includes wildfire investigators, professionals trained specifically to determine the origin and causes of fires. And this started because many countries, when they were requesting support, they really wanted not only to suppress the fire, but know why it happened, how it happened, where it happened, who did it, or what. And one of those investigators is this guy, Antonio. Antonio is a ranger. And in fact, now in every FAST team deployed across the world from Spain, there is at least one ranger responsible for fire investigation. Rangers like Antonio not only provide technical expertise in active fire zones, but also share the knowledge with local teams, training other rangers on how to investigate fires and contribute to reducing wildfire risk in their own regions. And that's the power of combining field experience with technical training. And it's a clear example of local action with global relevance. Right now, there are some other countries that are adopting these FAST teams, and hopefully they will also include rangers. And to finish, and well, I say this with all humility, and I hope it doesn't come across as immodest. If a forest burned less, recovered faster, or never caught fire at all, there is a good chance a ranger was there. Not by accident or not by luck, but because someone was doing the quiet, constant, difficult work of protecting that landscape long before the flames ever arrived. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's a great way of finishing that. Quiet, constant work, and unnoticed. And the World Ranger Day is an opportunity to celebrate rangers and that quiet, constant work that we don't always see that happens in the background. So Borja, thank you very much for that presentation, and that linking their local action into sort of global relevance. Which I think is really resonant and works, and people understand that. Just before we go into Amanda, just one thing I want to just highlight there is that link to the community and the importance of knowledge sharing, ultimately building in trust, which I think is something that Amanda is going to be touching on now, and how we can rangers act as that bridge into the communities in a different way to other first responders and other government services, perhaps. Which is so important in building trust with local communities. Amanda, sorry, her internet isn't perfect, so we won't be able to see her, but we will be able to hear her. So Amanda, over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. And I have to say, Borja, that was particularly interesting for me as an Australian with fire response, such a huge part of my role as a ranger here in such a fire-prone continent. And we've got really good statistics to back up that last saying that you showed, that out of our really big fire season in 2019-2020, it was proven that over 95% of fires that started on parks and reserves managed by rangers, of those rare few that did actually move off park, all of them were contained within a very small area, and none of them damaged buildings or things off a reserve, so which was an incredible statistic for the sheer scale of the fires. So it's absolutely true and backed by statistics. So kia ora koutou, bula vinaka, talofa lava, and warm greetings from Oceania. Sorry, if we just go back to the first slide. So as Jonathan said, I'm Amanda Dudgeon. I'm the Oceania representative for the IRF. And today I wanted to spotlight the vital work of rangers across our region, work that connects nature, people, and culture in really powerful ways. So Oceania is vast, stretching from the rainforests of Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste to the coral atolls of Kiribati and the rugged coastlines of Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. Across this diverse region, rangers are not just protecting biodiversity, but they're upholding Indigenous and local knowledge systems, leading climate adaptation efforts and helping communities really thrive. Next slide, please. So in our region, land is actually often held by communities, not governments. That makes Indigenous peoples and local communities really central to conservation, and ranger programs have proven to be the most effective tool to support that. The Solomon Islands Rangers Association is a really brilliant example of this, and is pictured here in front of us. It's been the rangers, not the outside NGOs, who've led the community-based training, secured amazing partnerships, and created jobs in those local communities by protecting land and marine ecosystems. So these programs allow IPLCs to assert their land rights while also building resilience to outside threats like illegal logging and climate-driven impacts. So ranger associations across Oceania are really empowering communities from the ground up, showing that conservation, particularly in our region, is most effective when it's locally led and really culturally grounded. Next slide, please. So I'm sure many are aware, but for those who aren't, Oceania is one of the most climate vulnerable regions in the world. We normally suffer many cyclones, tidal waves from volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, extreme droughts, fires, and lots of issues to do with sea level rise immediately impacting countries right now. And these are a daily reality for rangers. So rangers are really on the front lines of climate adaptation itself. For example, the bottom photo on this slide is the Tongan Youth Congress, and in Tonga, youth rangers are replanting mangroves to stabilise coastlines and protect villages, because when they had a tsunami that badly impacted Tonga in 2022, the areas that were not impacted and protected were because mangroves hadn't been removed yet. So it's literally life-saving and island-saving work that these young people are doing, completely unpaid, and educating their communities. In Samoa, a village-led ranger program is implementing a ridge-to-reef model, and that's the river you can see in the middle and the rangers in that top photo. So they're protecting forest, managing waste, and restoring their river systems and mangroves. And that community now trains other villages to do the same. And this same village was the very first one in Samoa to say no and push back to the government to say that they weren't going to permit a dam being put on their river. And they actually had the land rights to be able to do that. So it shows that the really community-driven and particularly ranger programs empower these local communities to protect their land from developments that are not in line with the future of their communities, and are not in line with what's important for climate adaptation. So these rangers really are the bridge between science and tradition, between environment and everyday life. So they show what it means to restore ecosystems, not just for biodiversity, but also for community survival. Next slide, please. This is probably one of my favourite photos, actually, from my expedition a few years ago. These are the Barijawi Uruni Rangers, some wonderful female rangers up in Adiulan in the Kimberley. It's the very far northwest of Western Australia. So Biocultural diversity is a concept that resonates really deeply in our region, because in Oceania, biodiversity, or as it is everywhere, is really inseparable from language, culture, and identity. So in Australia, Indigenous ranges like the Badjawi-Urani ranges combine thousands of years of knowledge with scientific practices to manage fire, care for threatened species, and restore country. And when we're talking thousands of years, we're talking over 60,000 years. So this is knowledge that goes back to prior to the previous ice age. So if you want knowledge on how climate changes and how to adapt to it, look to your Indigenous peoples and local communities. In Papua New Guinea, ranger teams are finding new ways to address local protein shortages and protecting native species, as well as resisting illegal logging by strengthening cultural ties to land and developing ranger programs that allow them to protect certain species such as tree kangaroos, whilst looking at novel ways to address those local protein shortages, which is looking at outside of Papua New Guinea for things like chickens and pigs and other species that they may be able to raise in their villages so they don't have to hunt these highly threatened species. So these are not just conservation jobs, they're acts of cultural renewal. So they prove that IPLC-led ranger programs really are essential to any serious global response to climate change and biodiversity loss. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, we have the very cute Australian koala, a stunning pigeon from Solomon Island, which is one of the rare and beautiful species that is very popular in the illegal wildlife trade. You have a stunning tree kangaroo from Papua New Guinea and a very tricky kakapo from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So Oceania has some of the highest rates of endemism and biodiversity on Earth. And that's largely because of our isolations as island nations and as a region globally. But that also comes with great vulnerability. So tourism, trade, and introduced species threaten these unique ecosystems every day, and far more than most regions in the world. Our species are highly susceptible to impacts of these invasive species and diseases. And rangers play a really critical role in biosecurity. So tracking and responding to emerging threats like invasive plants, pest animals, and diseases. In Australia alone, we battle everything from feral camels, foxes, cats, all sorts of things, fire ants, invasive grasses, often in really extreme environments and with very limited resources. And yet, all of the rangers in Oceania are continuing to innovate and find new ways and ways to balance invasive control with ecological resilience, especially as climate shifts what's possible and what's needed. And an example of that is in Australia, we have invasive species such as Lantana camera, which is a shrub, and just blackberry, which is very tasty when it's in the right country, and has been a weed for many decades, but is in the impact of climate change with increased drought and reduction of available habitat for some of our ground-dwelling birds and some of our small marsupials. Blackberry and Lantana are actually providing critical habitat to species where their native habitats are no longer providing that protection from, in fact, invasive animals such as foxes and cats. So we're trying to find a balance in naturalized flora, and this is often contrary to a lot of thinking of traditional ecologists and scientists who have somewhat more black and white concepts of what is native and what is not. Next slide, please. So as we approach World Ranger Day tomorrow, let's remember that behind every conservation success story is a ranger or a team of rangers working with quiet determination and really deep commitment. Rangers in Oceania protect more than wildlife. They protect our future. They're keeping ecosystems intact, culture alive, and communities strong in the face of immense challenges. If we are serious about climate change, equity, and biodiversity, then we must invest in rangers, especially those from Indigenous and local communities who hold the keys to lasting change. Thank you.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for that. That was really insightful. Again, sort of highlighted some of those, your point there around, behind these positive stories around conservation, there are people. There are people making these things happen, and invariably those are rangers doing that work day in, day out. And that deep commitment that they continue to show. I think as we go into the next presentation, we're going to see some of that deep commitment come through. But we're going to start with a short video, which just highlights the region that these rangers are working in, which then I think gives context to what they're going to be talking about next. So again, if we can play the video, please, and then we'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Ian. If we go to the next slide, please. That video is sort of a wonderful kind of video to show the diversity of ranger roles and the people who play those roles. I mean, as we went through that, I was trying to sort of keep a note of all the different things that rangers were doing, from human wildlife conflict to drone operators to flood planning to community engagement to educators to guards to defenders of the protected area itself. So I think it's really good to highlight both the diversity and the stunning beauty of the Kaziringa National Park, but also the variety and diversity of the roles that the rangers play there. We're going to be joined now by Sumita, who's going to be our first female ranger from the national park, to kind of talk through basically her role as a female ranger, but also how they deal with as a first responder to flooding, which is part of the natural process in the national park. Just so everyone's aware, so Sumita will talk, and then Hina will translate afterwards. So over to you, Sumita, and Hina, thank you.
जय हिंद सर, मेरा नाम सुमिता বৈশ্য है। মই 2 বছৰৰ পৰা বিশ্ব ঐতিহ্য ক্ষেত্ৰ কাজিৰঙা ৰাষ্ট্ৰীয় উদ্যানত কৰ্মৰত হৈ আছো। আমি বানপানীৰ সময়ত বহুত সাৱধান অৱলম্বন কৰিব লাগে। বানপানীৰ সময়ত এনেকুৱা হয়, আমাৰ প্ৰধান আৰু মূল উৎস হৈছে আমাৰ নাওখন। গতিকে আমি ৰেচন কৰিবলৈ যাওঁতে বা বিভিন্ন কাৰণত বেমাৰ আজাৰ হলে আমি ফাৰ্ষ্ট ভিতৰৰ পৰা বাহিৰত ওলাই আহিবৰ কাৰণে আমাৰ মূল উৎস হৈছে নাওখন। আমি নাও চলাই বাহিৰলৈ ওলাই আহো। তাৰপিছত আমাক এনেকে ৰেচন পাতি কৰি পিনি আকৌ আমি ভিতৰত যাওঁ নাও লৈ পিনি। তাৰপিছত আৰু আমাৰ বানপানীৰ সময়ত মূল হৈছে আমাৰ এৰিয়া চাব লাগে। আমি সকলোৱে মিলি পিনি নিজৰ নিজৰ এটা এৰিয়া বন্ধা থাকে, এই এৰিয়া চাব লাগে। এৰিয়া চোৱাৰ মূল উদ্দেশ্য হৈছে যে বানপানীৰ সময়ত কোনো বনৰীয়া জীৱ জন্তু যাতে মৃত অৱস্থাত নাথাকে বা আপোনাৰ কোনো কাঠনি বা বোকা পানীত ফচি নাথাকে, কোনো আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত হৈ নাই, সেইটো লক্ষ্য ৰাখি আমি পেট্ৰলিং কৰিব লাগে, নাও পেট্ৰলিং। তাৰপিছত আৰু কাজিৰঙা আৰু বানপানীৰ সময়ত কাজিৰঙা আৰু কাৰ্বি আংলং এটা নলে গলে লগা বন্ধু হৈ পৰে, কিয়নো ভিতৰত থকা জীৱ জন্তু বিলাক ওখ আশ্ৰয়ৰ বাবে ওখ ঠাই বিচাৰি কাজিৰঙাৰ ভিতৰৰ পৰা আপোনাৰ কাৰ্বি আংলঙৰ ফালে গমন কৰে। তাৰপিছত সেইটো গমন কৰাৰ সময়ত যাতে গাড়ীয়ে একো এক্সিডেণ্ট নকৰায়, তাৰ কাৰণে আমি গাড়ীৰ বাহিৰত গাড়ীৰ স্পীড লিমিটৰ চাব লাগে। বানপানীৰ সময়ত আপোনাৰ ভিতৰত ডিউটি কৰাৰ সলনি আমি ৰোড চাইড পেট্ৰলিং কৰিব লাগে। 24 ঘণ্টা আমি ডিউটিত থাকিব লাগে, শিফ্ট ৱাইজ হয়। তাৰে আপোনাৰ যেতিয়া আমি ৰোড চাইড পেট্ৰলিং কৰো, তেতিয়া গাড়ী যাতে গাড়ীৰ লিমিটটো 40ৰ ওপৰত যাতে নাহে, তাৰ প্ৰতি আমি লক্ষ্য ৰাখিব লাগে। আৰু সেইখিনি সময়ত যাতে গাড়ীৰ দ্বাৰা কোনো জীৱ জন্তু বা জীৱ জন্তুৰ দ্বাৰা মানুহৰ যাতে কোনো আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত হ'ব নালাগে, নহয়, তাৰ কাৰণে আমি লক্ষ্য ৰাখিব লাগে। এইখিনি তাৰপিছত আৰু বানপানীৰ সময়ত দেখা যায় যে ওখ ঠাই বিচাৰি জীৱ জন্তু বিলাকে মানুহৰ ঘৰৰ লাষ্ট যোৱা মাহত মই এটা হক ডিয়াৰ ৰেস্কিউ কৰিব গৈছিলো। মানুহৰ বাৰীত আছিলে হক ডিয়াৰটো। তাৰপিছত আমি তাক মানে ধৰি আৰু ইমান হেৰি নকৰাকে চকুত বান্ধি পিনি গাড়ীত উঠাই পিনি আমি আমাৰ হেড কোৱাৰ্টাৰলৈকে লৈ আহিছো। তাৰপিছত তাক মলম পাতি কৰি পিনি আৰু আমাৰ ৰেস্কিউ চেণ্টাৰত জমা দিব লাগে, তাত আমি দি আহিছো। Hello, good evening everyone. I'm Hina Brahma.
Working as the biologist of Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve. I'll be translating the experiences shared by two of my fellow rangers, Sumita and Mitali, in English. So this is what Sumita Bashya said. I have been working in Kaziranga National Park for the past 2 years. During the annual floods, our primary responsibility is flood time patrolling, which we carry out using boats. These boats are our lifeline during the monsoon season. We depend on not just for patrolling, but also for essential needs like transporting food supplies, monthly rations, and even accessing medical treatment when somebody falls sick. So our patrolling is carried out 3 to 4 days a week, depending on the situation. Apart from patrolling in the floods, we are also deployed along the national highway that cuts across the parts of the national park. Uh, During floods, animals try to escape the submerged areas and cross the highway to reach safer, higher grounds, particularly towards the neighboring Karbi Hill. Our job is to ensure their safe passage and minimize the risk of accidents or with vehicles and people. One memorable experience I had this year in June, in the peak flood, and ensure relocate.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Good morning. Sorry, sir. Good evening.
Hi there. Yes, I think we're losing Hina there.
Sorry.
Do you want to try again? Sorry, quickly.
মোৰ নাম মিতালী বৰুৱা। মই ইয়াতে কাম কৰি থকা 2 বছৰ হৈছে। মোৰ ইয়াতে এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ হৈছে 2 বছৰৰ। আৰু আজি এই মিটিংখনৰ মূল উদ্দেশ্য হৈছে বানপানীৰ ওপৰত। আমি বানপানীৰ সময়ত কেনেকৈ ডিউটি কৰোঁ, কি কৰোঁ, সেয়াই হৈছে আজি মিটিংখনৰ উৎস। আৰু আমি বানপানীৰ সময়ত পেট্ৰলিং ডিউটি কৰিব লাগে। আমাৰ পেট্ৰলিং ডিউটি হয় নাৱত। আৰু আমাৰ পেট্ৰলিং ডিউটিৰ মেইন উৎসই হৈছে নাওখন। আমাৰ প্ৰত্যেকটো কেম্পৰে আণ্ডাৰত এখন এখন নাও থাকে আৰু সেই নাও লৈ আমি পেট্ৰলিং ডিউটি কৰিব লাগে। পেট্ৰলিং ডিউটিত আমি এৰিয়া চোৱা ডিউটি কৰিব লাগে, যাতে নিজৰ এৰিয়াটোত জীৱ জন্তু ক'তো আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত হৈ নাথাকে আৰু জীৱ জন্তু ক'তো মৃত্যু হ'ব লগা নহয়, তাৰ প্ৰতি আমি লক্ষ্য ৰাখিব লাগে। আৰু যদি জীৱ জন্তু আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত অৱস্থাত পোৱা যায়, তেতিয়া আমাৰ ছিনিয়ৰসকলক জনাব লাগে, ছাৰ বাইদেউসকলক জনাব লাগে। এই বিষয়ে আমি অৱগত কৰাব লাগে। আৰু যে বানপানীৰ সময়ত আমাৰ ৰেচনৰ ব্যৱস্থা আমি নাৱেৰে কৰিব লাগে আৰু বেমাৰ আজাৰৰ চিকিৎসা আমি নাৱেৰে গৈ কৰিব লাগে। আৰু বানপানীৰ সময়ত আমাৰ ৰোড চাইড ডিউটি হয় শ্বিফ্ট ৱাইজত। তেতিয়া জীৱ জন্তুবিলাকে বানপানীত থাকিব নোৱাৰি ওখ ঠাইলৈ বা নিৰাপদ ঠাইলৈ তেওঁলোকে যাবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰে। আৰু সেইটো তেওঁলোকে হাইৱে ওপৰেদিয়ে যায়। আৰু তেতিয়া হাইৱেত যিহেতু গাড়ী মটৰ অহৰ্নিশে চলাচল কৰি থাকে, তেতিয়া গাড়ী মটৰৰ ওপৰত স্পীড লিমিট দিয়া থাকে 40 কিলোমিটাৰ তলত। আৰু তেতিয়া আমাৰ এনিমেল কৰিডৰৰ ওচৰত আমাৰ ডিউটি হয়, শ্বিফ্ট ৱাইজত হয় সেই ডিউটি। আৰু গাড়ীবোৰ যাতে 40 কিলোমিটাৰ তলতে যায়, তাৰ প্ৰতি আমি লক্ষ্য ৰাখিব লাগে। গাড়ী মটৰৰ পৰা যাতে জীৱ জন্তুৱে ক'তো আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত হ'ব লগা নহয় বা জীৱ জন্তুৰ পৰা সাধাৰণ জনসাধাৰণৰ যাতে ক'তো আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত হ'ব লগা নহয়, তাৰ প্ৰতিও লক্ষ্য ৰাখিব লাগে। আমাৰ 24 ঘণ্টাই ডিউটি হৈ থাকে। আৰু মই যোৱা বছৰ বানপানীৰ সময়ত মই অকলে নহয়, আৰু আছিলে মোৰ লগত মানুহ। এখন গাঁৱৰ মানুহ এঘৰৰ পিছফালে চাম্বাৰ দিয়ে এটা আঘাতপ্ৰাপ্ত অৱস্থাত পোৱা গৈছিলে। আৰু এই ডিয়েৰটো আনি ডক্তৰে মলম পাতি কৰি তাক আকৌ আমাৰ ৰিজাৰ্ভৰ ভিতৰত এৰি দিয়া হয়, চকু বান্ধি অনা হয় প্ৰথমে। থেংক ইউ।
Hi, Hina, you're on mute, I'm afraid. You can just unmute yourself. I hope the signal's back working. Thank you.
I'll be talking about my experience during flood season. I've been serving in Kaziranga National Park the past 2 years, and it's crucial our which part of
Hina, I'm sorry, your network is breaking maybe because you're with them. Is it all right, Hina? I'll translate that.
Primary mode of for
Sonali,
patrolling, also on like areas.
yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Hina. I think your voice is breaking, Hina. Am I good to do the translation? Yeah?
Sonali, yes, please. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you and good evening, everyone. And thank you for giving us the opportunity, all the girls in Kaziranga. Such is life. I think the challenges, which very rightly Mike has mentioned. So what Mithali and Sumita, they both were mentioning about their day-to-day activities. Mithali was mentioning that how during the floods, they have to travel in country boats, as you can see in the bottom right. These are the country boats which are used by almost all the frontline in Kaziranga, and including the women. They also know how to row these boats, and their life becomes tough because they are literally cut off from the rest of the world, and they need to still live on the anti-poaching camp, and they have to for everything else, if it is, be it ration or for medical assistance and even for patrolling, they need to use the boat. She was also sort of mentioning this experience, the real life experience she had with rescue and rehabilitation, which was about this young calf, and how they had been able to rescue it. It was very swiftly treated at the rescue center and then released back into the wild, and she was able to experience that during her 2 years of stay currently at Kaziranga. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for stepping in there. I appreciate you giving some context there, and Hina, I appreciate your efforts there in trying to translate as we go through. I appreciate you're probably experiencing some heavy rain at the moment, which makes the reality of what you're doing, I think, even more resonant. And we appreciate that even more in your efforts to try and get that story across. So I hugely appreciate that, and obviously the work you do. And we'll come back, I think, once we have a few questions for the team there. Just before I go into kind of the next next piece, there's been a few questions that have come through, which I've got. I just want to know if there's anybody else who would like to kind of put their hand up and have questions directly to any of the rangers or to the presenters we had on beforehand. There's a couple that have come through in notes to me, but I'll open up to the floor first. So please, if there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will get started. Borja, there was a question in the text to you, and it was around a statement you made earlier around how fires are started. I think it's more of a point of clarification here, saying, is it accurate to say all fires are started by people? And again, like, what is the proportion that maybe are started by people? What is more naturally started fires, say through lightning strikes and other occurrences? If you just give a bit of detail on that, that'd be really helpful, Boa.
Well, not all fires are human-made, and not all fires are natural-made. That's why it's so important for rangers to determine the causes of the fire, because when you determine the causes, each cause will need a different approach, right? Sometimes it can be a lightning, like you said, or it can be a bird that was perched on a high-tension cable that electrocuted and ignited, fell into the ground, started a fire. Sometimes it could be someone with a disc cutter creating sparks near a haystack. So it is really, really important to determine and avoid generalizations, and have a scientific and educated information about what is going on in the fields and in our forest in order to have a clear picture of what is going on and prevent it. I'm not sure if I'm fully answering the question.
No, I think you are. I think it was more just around that clarification that there are a number of ways of fire starting, but also that needs to be investigated. And that goes back to your presentation there about that process of investigation early and why it matters and what that then leads to.
Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, each region has its own sociological and natural phenomena, and that's what shapes the nature of those fires. In some places can be the slash and burn tradition, but sometimes it can be just a natural occurrence. And you have some, like, I give you an example, like a decade ago in Moscow, there was a big fire that was suppressed many times, but they didn't realize that the fire went underground, and there were coal embers under the ground in the absence of oxygen, keeping the heat, and every time the wind blew, that oxygen reignited it again. Not knowing that caused that they were constantly putting down a fire again and again and again. So things like this are very important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Boaz. I think that clears that up. Thank you. Amanda, there was a question really for you, and this is, maybe more broadly as well. But it was really on how, in your interactions with people, IPLCs, do they view themselves as rangers or, an equivalent title? And how do they see that? And I think that's also, Sonali, probably a question as well to you as well and your team. Again, I'm using the term ranger very broadly, but for instance, you talked about their forest goddesses. Do they take that role and title on themselves, and do they feel like their ownership of that, or do they feel that sort of can be imposed upon them? So, Amanda, I don't know if you're able to take that first from Oceana.
Yes, certainly, and it's actually a really good question because it's something that's perhaps not well understood. That often I suppose the Western concept of a ranger existed well before, I suppose, the United States invented the concept of national park and created the English name of ranger. Existed well before that, and certainly there's many different words for ranger within Oceania. The Maori of Aotearoa, New Zealand, call it kaitiaki, and wasserman in Papua New Guinea, and particularly in Australia, it's really, in Australia, Indigenous land's called country with a capital C, and healthy country means healthy people. So looking after country and that concept is just a part of who Indigenous Australians are. And so be it that you are a female ranger or a male ranger, that concept of ranger is inherently built into their cultures. It's they don't put a label on it in necessarily the same way, but they very clearly understand that. And one of the benefits of putting a label on it, even if it is the English term ranger or forest guard or guardian, is the difference that can make in the communities. So when there's been disconnection or that land being taken away from local communities or threats to that communities or breakdown of social structure following colonization and other challenges, identifying as a ranger and seeing yourself as a ranger, you're a real leader in that community. You're often the one that they look to. You might be the only one with first aid training. You might be the rare person with education, all with that natural inherent leadership skills to be able to assist the community in dealing with government, in setting up ranger programs, in having tourists within your community to help raise funds to support your community in staying on their land. So we found that more than anything else for IPLCs, having that identity and respect and acknowledgement for that individual is often part of that culture to begin with, and you're simply creating that or attaching a modern term to it to help it become recognised by governments and those outside of that community as well as within it. So it's not always the term ranger itself, but that identity of that role within a community is absolutely there and very proudly held, and it is something that absolutely translates across cultures. And during my expedition, I could walk into any community in any nation as a white female ranger and instantly know that I was respected and safe and understood simply because I was a ranger and they understood what that meant.
Amanda, thank you. Yeah, I think that's really interesting about sort of, they say it's not the term itself, it's the recognition that comes with it, and therefore the understanding of that shared understanding of what that role is. And interesting that you talk about healthy people, healthy country. You know, we are now kind of reinventing again like indigenous knowledge with sort of One Health kind of ideals. But it's interesting to see that obviously that has existed for a long time within these communities. So Nali, just again, the sort of same question around that recognition and understanding and the use of the term ranger.
Right. Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Amanda, for summing it up so beautifully. I mean, I guess in terms of the definition, in terms of the way we look at rangers, I guess, and especially if I talk about Mithali and Sumita and Hina for that matter, because they are all rangers in their own right. It is basically they represent this a lot many, perhaps thousands of women and young girls who would like to work in the forest, but yet there are these stereotypes, there are these mindsets and barriers which prevent them. And that's why when we have terms such as the forest goddess, which is, by the way, the Van Durgas, it's not for something like epitomizing them or putting them on a pedestal, but more out of the respect and sort of giving them the room that yes, you've made the effort to come all the way, and you're recognized for that. Interestingly, the term the Van Durga or forest goddess was not something which we coined. We sort of, they are, for us, they are the same. They are the forest frontline, forest guards, foresters, and so on. It was our Honorable Prime Minister who visited Kaziranga last year, and when he met these women, he was very impressed and he coined the term. So yes, it does help to get a bit of a recognition, not just for the communities, but I would say also for the peers, for the colleagues, and and to break that glass ceiling that yes, even women can be at the helm of affairs, at doing what they can for nature protection as good as their male counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you, Snai. I appreciate that. And it's interesting that was that name was given to them after a visit by the Prime Minister. I think that's really interesting and an insightful way people understand and use labels in different ways. And it's important that we use it to support the role and what actually people are doing on the ground. Just very conscious of time. We have 5 minutes, and so yeah. And is it possible if we can just put on the last little bit of the presentation, talk about kind of next steps, and then possible future engagement with rangers, the ICN, and the Wild Conservation Congress. Next slide, please. So the IRF over the next few years is going to be implementing an awful lot of work. That work originated at the most recent Ranger Congress. So even though I'm talking about the future, I'm going to quickly go back in time to October last year, where we had the World Ranger Congress in France. This is an opportunity for rangers to come together from around the world. And the main output of this is something called the Ranger Declaration, which is where we listen and hear what rangers have been saying over the last few years, what their priorities are, and then they give us direction, the IRF, about what they want to see happen over the next period. And the next period is really up until the next World Ranger Congress, which is in Argentina in 2027. Next slide, please. So this declaration is focused on a number of sort of key areas. And I think all of these areas have been highlighted through the presentations that we've seen. So role recognition, conditions, competencies, conduct, an inclusive workforce, and ranger contributions. And that last piece there, ranger contributions, is about how rangers are contributing to those global issues that we've been talking about over the last hour or so. Talking about how they contribute to Target 3, how they contribute to climate mitigation and adaptation, and making sure that the big conferences and the big organizations understand that. Next slide, please. We're now in the process of turning that action, so that declaration, into an action plan. So this then takes all of the things that rangers have asked for, it translates them across into objectives and into actions, which then the IRF and URSA are charged with delivering over this next period. Some of these actions are going to be very sort of long-term and might take until 2030 or beyond to achieve. Some of them are more sort of tangible and direct. And a lot of that is around, as Mike talked about earlier, about how do we implement and use some of the standards that have been created? How do we get some of these standards to the ground to make sure that rangers have the best training, have the correct working conditions and support, but also have things like a code of conduct, which kind of manages and helps their interaction with both the community, but also their employer as well. Next slide, please. So as I say, we're currently developing that action plan and we'll be releasing that to everybody. Between now and the release of the action plan, though, we will be launching the next State of the Ranger, which, as I said earlier, is our main M&E tool. It's the way we manage, understand what is happening in the ranger workforce around the world. Are the things that we're implementing to our action plan having an effect? Are people using the standards? And are we seeing positive change as a result of that? That only works if people obviously engage. So next slide, please. This map of the world shows in volume 1 where we had responders. So the gray, sadly, is 0 responses. We've got a really mixed audience. And right at the very start, I think Charlie said if we can put in people's countries, there are some countries with zeros responses that are represented in this audience today. So as we send out information about how to participate in the State of the Ranger Volume 2, please, please, please do engage. The more responses we have, the better understanding we have of what is happening on the ground, the changes to the workforce, and how we can then respond and act to make sure that we are seeing the positive change that the Rangers have been asking for. Next slide, please. Next up will be the IUCN World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi this year, which I'm hoping we're going to see many people there at. And there are two really, well, there are a number of really exciting things happening there, but the two kind of focuses for myself. Mike talked about the motion 102, which is a ranger-specific motion about recognizing rangers, which I think is really, really important. And that's getting some really good traction internationally already. And the second is, again, another opportunity to celebrate rangers. We talk about, that silent work, that quiet work in the background that, everybody has been talking about. This is an opportunity, and thank you again to the IUCN and the IUCN WCPA for leading on this, is how we recognize and celebrate the amazing stories. We've had 3 amazing teams today talk about the work they do, and the Ranger Awards again is an opportunity for us to remember that, recognize that, and be proud of the Rangers that we work with and we work around. Next slide, please. And then also in the lead up to the next Congress, we have a number of regional congresses. And again, these help to set the agenda for the International Congress. So we've got this year, we've got the European and the African Ranger Congress, which again, I hope many of you will have the opportunity to be at. Myself, I'm looking forward to being at the European Congress, and I think Chris will be in the African Ranger Congress as well. And then next year, we'll be having congresses in Oceania, North America, Asia, and Latin America as we build up to the World Ranger Congress in Argentina in 2027, and then we check on our progress. How are we doing? How are we doing? Are we delivering for Rangers in what they've been asking for at the previous declaration? Next slide, please. So we are right at the end of our time, and I think there's been a huge amount presented. I hope people have appreciated it, have understood a little bit more about what Rangers do, who they are, the diversity of their roles, and also an opportunity to remember that tomorrow is the 31st of July. It's not just the 31st of July, it's World Ranger Day. It's a day that we remember and we celebrate Rangers. Chris, I just want to hand over to you if you're still there, if there's anything you want to say in closing, very briefly. But from myself, a big thank you to the WCPA, for Yen, for Charlie, for allowing us to present today.
Thank you, John. Thanks to yourself, and thank you to the Rangers for doing such interesting presentations. It's fantastic to get on the ground insight into what Rangers are doing. I hope everyone appreciated it. Thank you for this platform. And then just finally, as John said, let's look to celebrate. A big shout out to all the Rangers from IRF, to all the Rangers past and present, just to say that we recognize you and we stand with Rangers tomorrow. To all our partners, a big thank you to them for participating in the celebration of Rangers, and thank you for standing with Rangers on that special day. So if we can, as we celebrate World Ranger Day, share your stories, share what Rangers are doing, share with the world the fantastic and critical work that Rangers are doing around the world. So on that note, happy World Ranger Day, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy World Ranger Day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
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 Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.